Blue and white stripes. Today they are considered a classic, a staple in fashion. So many brands and designers have worked with them. When I think about the stripes, I immediately think of Coco Chanel and this iconic picture where she herself wore a Breton shirt. I also think of Jean-Paul Gaultier and his sexy image of sailors that he frequently takes up in his designs. And I already said it, it's a classic. And sometimes you may also notice with classics, we take them, we wear them, like the white t-shirt, the blue jeans, but we have completely forgotten where they actually came from, even though the links are so obvious. Blue and white stripes, yes, it's obvious. I'm not telling you something new, it's sailors. But how did this uniform actually come about? How did it enter fashion? And this is what I'm going to analyze in this video. And if you're new here, welcome. My name is Liz. I talk about luxury and fashion once a week. So if you want to learn more about fashion history, the luxury industry, or fashion events, come on over, join the fun, and subscribe to my channel. And also some very brief housekeeping here. I have to do this. This is a non-sponsored video. I'm just sharing my personal opinion and my research here. But I would like to thank the Gothenburg Maritime Museum, who also supported me with press material for this video, and where I also attended a private tour which was very interesting through this temporary exhibition Oceanista, Fashion and the Sea. And just by the way, by the time I upload this video, there are only a few days left of this exhibition Oceanista, Fashion and the Sea at the Maritime Museum in Gothenburg. But if you make it to Sweden and to Gothenburg, I highly recommend to visit the museum. It gives you a very interesting overview over all things maritime, which you may not expect. It's not like one of these boring, old, dusty museums. It's quite interesting, so I highly recommend that you go there, even if this temporary exhibition is over. There's actually a special term for this blue and white striped pattern, Breton stripes, which is mostly used outside of France. Breton refers to Brittany, Bretagne, the region in France, and this already shows us the origins of this blue and white striped pattern, because the French Navy introduced uniforms in 1858. It is one of the first navies, if not the first navy, to introduce uniforms for the seafarers. For a very long time, the seafarers didn't really have a formal uniform. So the French Navy opted for the blue and white stripes, and because we talk about the military here, there were also certain rules about it. There had to be 21 white stripes, and they had to alternate with 20 or 21 blue stripes. There is a myth that it's actually related to Napoleon and that the 21 stripes represent his victories. This is not really a fact. This is indeed a myth. Where does the number come from? It's actually a practical reason. It relates to the actual size of the shirt. So this number of stripes relates to the actual length of the shirt and not the victories of Napoleon. Why did the Navy choose those uniforms? A main reason was visibility. If there was a man overboard and they were wearing something that could be easily seen in water, they could identify the person and potentially rescue them. And up until then, stripes were not really part of everyday fashion, which is interesting from today's perspective because there are so many stripes everywhere in fashion, in interior design. But up until the French Navy took the stripes up, stripes were actually more associated with social outcasts, for example, clowns, prostitutes, sometimes even people who broke the law. Because think about it, even today when we see white and black stripes or a suit in those stripes, we sometimes still think about jail or prison. But when the French Navy took the stripes up, and soon the striped pattern was part of many other navies globally, also the British Navy, for example, the striped pattern became something kind of aspirational. So also the reputation of the stripes changed throughout fashion history. So why is it called Breton shirt until today? What's the reason for this link to La Bretagne in France? The reason is quite a simple one. From this area, a lot of men went and joined the Navy. So a lot of people associated men from that region with becoming sailors and wearing that uniform. And until today, this blue and white striped shirt is worn as an undershirt for sailors. The color blue is something obvious. We think of the ocean, so it fits very well, but there's also another reason, actually an economic reason behind this. So the indigo plant came to Europe via America and India. And at the time in the 19th century, indigo, the dye, was something very expensive to make. Even today, if it's really made from the indigo plant by hand, it's very expensive. It takes a lot of time from harvesting, like growing the plant, harvesting, then also producing the dye. And then due to colonialism, slave labor was exploited. Indigo, the dye, could be produced cheaply, of course, because people were exploited. This made it more accessible to the market, especially in Europe. And this is why indigo blue then at the time in the 19th century also became such a popular color, which previously only was reserved to the rich. And this is also why it was taken up in sailors' uniforms, for example. Who actually made the first Breton shirt, we don't really know. We just know that the Navy started in the mid-19th century, and then from then onwards they had their suppliers, but the MoMA in 2017 called a French company the genuine maker of this Breton shirt, and they named the company Arcival. Arcival started to supply the French Navy from the 1940s onwards with the shirts, and according to my research they don't supply the French Navy anymore, but they still sell the shirt, but they work now with customers, so you can order this iconic shirt on their website, so they still produce it. So this classic garment today actually has the roots in the military, the Navy, similar to what I said about the history of the trench coat, and then it slowly became very popular in fashion, in pop culture, and this is also due to one woman, Coco Chanel, who famously wore the Breton shirt herself. She spent a lot of time at the seaside, and there are pictures of her wearing these shirts. And today it still looks like an elegant or cool look, but at the time we have to put this into context. This was actually quite revolutionary for several reasons. In the 1930s, yes, there was movement in fashion, there was a bit less of the corset, it was the aftermath of the 1920s, but still it was not normal that women everywhere wore pants like today. And then she also did another thing. She took a garment which was used for jobs for men, sailors, and then she used it to wear on a daily basis. So not only it's the pants, the men's garment, but also a uniform created for men that she then adapted for the needs of women, and also showed women you are free to wear whatever you want, whatever makes you feel comfortable and allows you freedom of movement. Because let's be honest, it obviously allows a lot of freedom of movement, because if sailors wear it, it has to be practical. And at the time in the 1930s, a lot of women's fashion was still not practical yet. So this was a very, very big move. She took up this sailor theme a lot in her collections, but what I have to say, maybe not in the literal sense with the stripes. There are some articles that circulate online that say Coco Chanel used those stripes in her 1917 collection. So I did my research. I could not confirm this. If you know more about this, please let me know in the comments below. I think the influence was a bit different. So first of all, we have the influence, this empowerment of women, that it was male fashion that she actually adapted for women. But then also she took up kind of the color scheme, because we know she loved black and white. But then she also did work with a lot of navy, and very often she also combined it with red. Famously, she said, in addition to black and white, red is the only acceptable color. And when we think of the navy uniforms, for example, the British Navy, it's navy, blue, white and red. So she worked a lot with this, and I think this is more a subtle influence of all this time that she spent by the seaside, instead of saying she took up the blue and white stripes in a literal way. And until today, the brand Chanel works a lot with the nautical themes, not only for the cruise collections, but there's also this very interesting pair of shoes with a heel that looks like a knot from like a sailing boat, for example. So these are very interesting details that the brand still incorporates. And Coco Chanel was not the only person who loved the Breton shirt. It became a staple also for artists, authors, intellectuals. For example, Jean Cocteau or Pablo Picasso wore such a shirt. Then also, of course, later Brigitte Bardot and also Audrey Hepburn. And until today, we keep seeing variations of this top everywhere. So when I think of blue and white stripes, I do think about Coco Chanel, I think about celebrities, but the first person or designer coming to my mind is actually Jean-Paul Gaultier. You may know I'm a big fan of his fashion, and the sailor and this blue and white striped pattern have become a very important part of the Jean-Paul Gaultier brand or design DNA. And he actually said this relates back to his childhood on the one hand, because his mother made him wear all these sailors' jumpers. So from very early on, he fell in love with that garment. He also said that he very much liked this graphic aspect, the architectural aspect of the stripes. But when we talk about the blue and white stripes in Jean-Paul Gaultier's designs, it's more than just the childhood memories, the architectural aspect. It actually goes to the image of the sexy sailor. And where did this come from? In 1962, there was a movie by Rainer Werner Fassbinder called Querelle, and this movie was actually based on a novel by the French author Jean Genet, and he is also one of the favorite authors of Jean-Paul Gaultier. So we already see the circle closing, and this movie kind of kick-started this view on the sexy sailor, so that the sailor was eroticized, it fetishized the sailor's top, and it also kick-started a whole movement within pop culture, especially also the image of the sexy homosexual sailor. And this is nothing unique to Jean-Paul Gaultier. This is overall a movement in pop culture or in society, but he very much works with this dimension of the sexy sailor in his designs. And he took this sailor theme, whether it's the stripes or other elements, up not only in menswear but also women's wear, and he used it for ready-to-wear but also for haute couture. So you can see this is a very important theme for Jean-Paul Gaultier, and for me it's actually something really, really beautiful. I really love how he works with this classic theme that also has such a strong perspective on it with the sexy sailor, and then also turns it into very feminine things, for example, into gowns for women. So I really love how he works with this. And he also combined the stripes with feathers, pearls, and also with tattoos. And especially the tattoos are important again because they are yet another link to the sailors that popularized them. At first they were only used for the sailors, and then they slowly made their way also into other parts of society. So I very much like how he works with all these elements. And what I really appreciate about this blue and white striped pattern or the sailor's top is that it looks like such a simple garment. It's a classic, as I said, and we have kind of forgotten about its roots. And yes, there's this obvious link to the sailors, but there's so much to learn about where it actually came from, what it can stand for, how it was used in different contexts, not only for the uniforms or in fashion, but also in movies, in pop culture. So this is something that shows me that fashion can be much more than just stuff that we wear every day. So I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did to learn more about this seemingly classic garment. And I would like to know about you. What do you think about the blue and white stripes? Do you like them? Who are your favorite designers using them? Or are you kind of sick of it because you see it too much? Please let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to do two things that are very important for us creators. Please like this video and also subscribe to my channel if you haven't done so already. If you prefer to read about fashion, I have a lot of articles on my website, thepinklookbook.com, and you can also check out my fashion label Pelagona. And if you enjoyed this video about Jean-Paul Gaultier and his use of the blue and white stripes, I have another video for you which may be interesting. Thank you very much for joining me in this video, and see you in the next one.